Grace and peace to you in the name of God the Creator, Christ the Redeemer, and the Spirit who sustains us. Amen. First of all, let me say that when I chose the text for today, I had no idea it would be David's last Sunday. If I had, we might have skipped right over Moloch and gone directly to keeping the Sabbath. Or we might not have. As we've discovered during our exploration of Leviticus this summer, God has a word for us, even in this book that often feels like it might be less than relevant for 21st century Christians. We're in the 6th week of our 7-week series on Leviticus. We started by grounding ourselves in the historical, geographic, and religious context of the Israelites. They arrived at the foot of Mount Sinai 90 days after escaping from Egypt, where they remain. God has given them the law and has instructed them to build the Ark of the Covenant and the tabernacle, which they've done. Leviticus is concerned with the religious and ethical life of the people. In the first 17 chapters, God's priority is to show the people how to live together as a spiritually healthy community and how to restore their community to health when their relationships with each other and with God have been harmed, whether those hurts were intentional or accidental. And we talked about appearance and cleanliness and how they might or might not impact our full participation in the community. Chapters 18 through 20, which is where we find ourselves now, are frequently called the Holiness Code. Last week, our focus was on the commandments as a way to help us understand what it means to love our neighbor as ourselves and to put that understanding into action. Because as Leviticus 18 and 19 make clear, what is most important to God when it comes to our being holy, becoming holy, is not our relationship with God. It's how we treat each other, especially when the refrain of our lives becomes the words, "I am your God," words that are repeated over and over in these 3 chapters. With that context in mind and centering ourselves again on the keystone of Leviticus, "You shall become holy, for I, your God, am holy." Let's look at the second part of the Holiness Code. So who is Moloch anyway? There aren't a lot of mentions of Moloch in the Bible, and the ones there are mostly in Leviticus. From the limited contextual clues, there are multiple interpretations, but most scholars agree that Moloch was a deity of the Canaanite underworld. Jacob Milgram, one of the preeminent scholars on Leviticus, theorizes that although the priestly class of the Israelites taught that it was unacceptable to worship anyone other than God, it was not uncommon for lay people to see worship of God and Moloch as compatible. After all, one is the creator of the world and all that exists, and the other one isn't. It may have even been some sort of ancestor worship. So what's the problem? Beyond the commandment not to worship any other gods, why is worship of Moloch not only problematic, but deserving of such a punishment as stoning? As God cutting off from God's people, not only the people who worship Moloch, but the people who ignore Moloch worship in their midst. Repeatedly in these holiness chapters in Leviticus, we are pulled back into the concept of the importance of community, the importance of holding fast to empathy, to an ethical standard grounded in our faith, in our dealings with our neighbor, the foreigners among us, the poor, our parents, and all those who have raised us, our children, day laborers, people who rely on us not to put impediments in their way, people we're angry with. As followers of Jesus, we are trying to become holy, so whenever a question of how we treat our neighbor comes up, the answer is always compassion. But not always compassion alone. Empathy and ethics aren't built on compassion to the exclusion of all else, and God calls us to accountability as well as compassion. As we heard last week, earlier in chapter 19, if you are angry with your neighbor, speak frankly about it to avoid storing up ill feelings. Never seek revenge or hold a grudge toward your relatives. And we hear it again this morning. The foreigner who lives among you must be treated like one of your own. Love them as you love yourself. And both times the refrain follows that echoes in our lives. I am your God. Our God who calls us to become holy, to love and care for our community, our neighbor in all ways, respecting them, ensuring their physical and emotional as well as their economic safety, making sure that they have enough to eat, protecting their right to rest and worship, being equitable in the administration of justice and the settling of disputes. All of this and more is what it means to become holy. Protecting them, helping them, and speaking up on their behalf, not looking the other way. Reports are emerging about conditions for the people who are interned in what's been dubbed Alligator Alcatraz, the concentration camp that was hastily built in the Florida Everglades, as well as others who have been interned at other ICE detention facilities around the country. The people who have been allowed to tour the facilities to check on prisoners, or who have spoken to prisoners who have been released, share reports of inhumane conditions. Not enough food or water, insanitary plumbing, no access to emergency medical care, often without access to legal help or even a phone call to let their families know where they are. And this week, the Department of Homeland Security, which oversees ICE as well as Citizenship and Immigration Services, Customs and Border Control, FEMA, and other departments released a new recruiting video. In the video, there's a combat-ready Department of Homeland Security person on a helicopter. A voiceover, we're meant to assume it's the same person, tells us about a Bible verse that the speaker has been thinking about a lot. And the verse from Isaiah 6 that's used, entirely out of context, by the way, is God asking who to send, and Isaiah responding, "Here am I, send me." The background music in the video is a re-recording of the chorus of Johnny Cash's song, "God's Gonna Cut You Down." We continue to see this slide into authoritarianism, into fascism, as though those in power are counting on inertia to protect them. Counting on our modern philosophy of live and let live, our modern idea that what I do or don't do doesn't impact anyone else's life. But it's not true. It never has been. We know it's not true. Within our church families, whether here at All Saints or elsewhere. We see that here, perhaps most clearly when we bring forward our monthly offering for Community Services League and recognize that even though it's only a very small drop in a very large bucket, the food and toiletries and cleaning supplies that we donate there will make a difference to someone. If what we do impacts others on our small scale, why shouldn't the same be true on a large scale? Here are two concrete examples of this within recent weeks. The bishop of the San Bernardino Diocese in California issued a formal ruling excusing from Mass anyone who has a, quote, genuine fear of being swept up in the ice raids. Attending Mass is considered an obligation of the faithful, and this sort of decree is reserved for events like the pandemic. There have been raids at church events in the LA area. Catholic churches in the area have seen as much as a 50% drop in attendance, and events such as baptisms are being put on hold out of fear of raids. According to a New York Times article, on the first Sunday after the raids began in May, members of a synagogue stood guard outside a Catholic church in a Latino neighborhood in LA during worship to monitor for any possible raids. And after the raid in MacArthur Park last weekend, the provost of Cal State LA has reiterated its policies allowing students to have excused absences and alternate makeup work, as well as allowing professors to move their classes online and work from home if need be, to promote student and faculty safety. Although there haven't been any raids on campus, many students expressed concern over taking public transportation or driving to campus. Both the Bishop of San Bernardino and the University of Cal State LA decided it was more important to take a public stand than to quietly act or to look away. So, what's the problem with Moloch? Why is it a big deal if some people choose to worship Moloch alongside God? Such a big deal, in fact, that God will set their face against even the families of the people who ignore Moloch worship. The problem is, it involves actually sacrificing their children, the future of their family and of the community, in the fire. And for someone to turn away from that, to ignore that as unworthy of notice, is morally and ethically repugnant in God's eyes. For the Creator of the world and all that is in it, some wounds are so deep the very land itself feels them. Some hurts are so bad the creation itself suffers with those who suffer. When the Israelites consecrate themselves to God, they do so not only for their own sake, but for the world, for every person, every place, every plant and animal, for all of creation. And when we choose to become holy, we make the same commitment. So what do we do? What can we do? From where do we find the desire to resist the Moloch worship of our own day? The sacrifices being made on the altar of power and greed. If we truly want to become holy as our God is holy, we think about what our treasure is and where it is found. What do we value? Where do we find ourselves moved to passion, moved to righteous anger or to joy, moved to speak or to act or to listen? Is it feeding people or getting out the vote or joining protests? Is it educating people about what's happening in the world or caring for the environment or starting a boycott? Is it speaking out and empowering others to speak? Is it local or national or international? As long as the refrain of our lives is, "I am your God," as long as the first deposit in our treasury is love your neighbor as yourself, then nothing we say, nothing we do is too small or insignificant. Everything we do matters to someone. Everything we do matters to God. Amen.